Welcome, curious minds, to another deep dive into the extraordinary. Today, we're plunging into a topic that feels like it's pulled straight from a sci-fi thriller, yet unexpectedly touches on global events, hidden influences, and really the very nature of how we perceive information itself.
Yeah, and our mission today is to navigate a truly unique set of sources for you. We have a
Yeah.
transcript from what's called a hypnosis investigative session, which discusses a predicted future blackout.
Okay.
And alongside that, there's a separate crucial analysis of, well, how reliable information gathered through sessions like that actually is.
Right, so we need to look at both the content and the container, so to speak.
Exactly. We're here to extract the most important insights, unearth some surprising facts, and, equip you to be well-informed about these complex and sometimes pretty mind-bending ideas.
And what a journey it is. The central subject, as you said, is this predicted blackout of April 28, 2025. Very specific.
Yeah.
And it's supposed to impact Spain, Portugal, and parts of southern France.
A very specific prediction, yeah. So let's start with the blackout itself, as described in that session. The initial perceptions were quite vivid.
What did they see?
The person described seeing lightning bolts concentrated in one place. Specifically, underground in central Spain.
Underground lightning.
Yeah, forming what was perceived as a jet of electricity penetrating deep into the earth. It paints a very dramatic picture.
That's quite an image. Could you elaborate on what the source identifies as the perceived physical causes for this?
Certainly. The physical causes seem to involve multiple elements.
Yeah.
It was described as a kind of vortex or maybe a tornado funnel.
Okay.
And this was directly linked to solar air currents and also ultrasensitive technologies.
Ultra-sensitive technology, where?
Well, what's particularly intriguing is this tech isn't just, floating around. It's apparently located within a military base deep beneath central Spain.
Wow, deep underground.
Yeah, and characterized by a distinct sense of bustle and attitude. That phrase alone, bustle and attitude, it sort of suggests a very active, maybe almost, defiant underground operation.
That description certainly jumps out, bustle and attitude. But then the sources pivot, don't they? They move to an esoteric or metaphysical dimension, which complicates the picture. How does that tornado funnel imagery reappear then?
That's where it gets really abstract. Yeah,
Yeah.
the tornado funnel image comes back, but this time it's described as a process of collecting, extracting, gathering energy. But from the earth upwards?
Upwards, not
Yeah.
downwards, causing the blackout.
Right, towards the sky, outwards.
Yeah.
So it's not about energy coming down to cause the blackout, but seemingly energy being pulled up from the earth.
And this isn't just random energy being collected, is it? The source implies it has a specific purpose.
Exactly. This collected energy is then said to mix with the matrix structure. Apparently, it solidifies it.
Solidifies the matrix. What does that actually mean?
Well, the comparison made was to a fishing net used to gather fish. So this energy is essentially feeding something.
Feeding what?
More specifically, it's said to fuel matrix structures, consciences, egregores. Now, for clarity, egregores in this context are often thought of as these collective thought forms or, like, energy constructs created by shared human emotions and beliefs.
Okay, so energetic entities created by our collective thoughts. What kind of thoughts or emotions are they feeding on in this scenario?
Yes, precisely. They're specifically tied to emotions of fear, thoughts of destruction, and concepts of control. Like the idea that we are controlled or we are at their mercy.
Right, the classic fear stuff.
Yeah, and it's described as a self-feeding mechanism. So this ultra-sensitive technology, launched from deep within the Earth's crust, acts as a collector, amplifying what was originally just a whisper of fear or control into a major event.
Like the blackout itself.
Exactly. This event then generates specific states in people, fear, uncertainty, whatever, which in turn refeeds these very structures. It's a potent idea, actually, not just for a hypothetical blackout, but maybe for understanding how any collective fear or narrative can gain momentum in our own world.
That's a pretty hairy concept to wrap your head around. How does the source connect that self-feeding mechanism back to the initial blackout event? And what about government awareness? Did they know? Was this predicted blackout on their radar?
Well, the session revealed a surprising, if maybe limited, level of government knowledge. Very few knew, it seems. Perhaps only those with a direct necessity to know.
Need-to-know basis. Standard.
Right. But what's quite striking is the mention of an informational document existing at governmental levels. And this document frames such events not as disasters, but as exercises.
Exercises. That's a fascinating, almost unsettling reframing. Like it's not a real threat, but a simulation or drill.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
What are the broader implications of a government treating such an event as a exercise, both for their own understanding and, for the population affected?
Yeah, that definitely changes the perspective, doesn't it? What's the purpose of these exercises then?
It seems twofold. One, to collect an analysis of people's behavior, emotions, reactions, attitude. Basically data gathering on human response.
Mm-hmm.
And also, as an exercise for them, the observers maybe to see beyond their usual checklists, to understand human response on a deeper level.
Okay.
And the directive within this document is apparently very clear. Anything that happens as a physical, natural event is not to be panicked about. These are exercises.
There's a very specific, almost detached viewpoint.
Yeah.
Suggests a long-term strategy maybe for data collection.
Okay, so we've got the physical and metaphysical causes, this weird government exercise angle. Now, let's talk ripple effects, starting with the collective consciousness of the affected nations during this predicted blackout. The sources note a schism. What did that look like? Yeah, it was interesting. For Spain, there were these contrasting images. A couple dancing, a slow contact dance, which symbolized peace, serenity, joy of life.
Right.
But alongside that, a black bubble signifying constraint and pressure.
Okay, so a mix. What about Portugal and France?
Portugal showed a calm sea, but also a small dark sphere, mirroring that sense of constraint or pressure. And France had an image of a road splitting into two directions, with not much activity.
But the key takeaway here seems pretty significant, right? Despite these pockets of pressure or constraint.
Yeah, the source emphasized that the state of peace and calm predominated much more than panic, especially in the physical space.
That's actually incredibly hopeful. It suggests that even facing perceived chaos, maybe a collective sense of inner resilience can prevail. What might that imply for how we prepare for, any major event?
It's a powerful insight, isn't it, into collective human behavior. It implies that physical presence and sort of groundedness could be a significant buffer against widespread panic, even without the usual infrastructure.
But there's always a but.
Well, yes.
Yeah.
While peace apparently predominated physically, the online environment showed a totally distinct and chaotic impact.
Ah, okay. How so?
The image described was someone literally blowing through internet cables and TV, releasing these sharp elements.
Sharp element.
Yeah, things that create chaos and scratch a structure, leading directly to the spread of divisive information.
So while people might have stayed calm in person, the internet was, well, as we often see, a mess of misinformation and division. That sounds terrifyingly familiar, actually.
Doesn't it?
And speaking of bigger pictures, the sources affirm an absolute link between global geopolitics and this blackout. How is that connection explained?
It's stated quite directly. Basically, all events with a large territorial impact that are mediatized, meaning get media attention, are intrinsically connected to politics.
Okay, politics how?
It's not necessarily about changing physical borders, but more about movements of positioning in territories, seizing power, specifically gaining leverage, positioning at the negotiating table.
So even something that looks like a natural disaster or a weird energy event is presented here as having a political undercurrent, influencing the global power dynamic.
That's the idea presented, yes.
This raises a huge question then. If it's about power, who's really at the top of this whole intricate system described here? The source introduces this deeper esoteric layer, right? A pyramidal structure where the very top isn't human.
Correct. That's where it gets even stranger, perhaps.
What are these entities described as?
What's fascinating is the description of these beings at the apex. They're called beings with capes, predominantly humanoids and reptilians.
Humanoids and reptilians, okay.
Yeah, with smaller percentages of insectoids like mantises, large grays, and draconians, which are also described as another type of reptilian extraterrestrial in these kinds of accounts.
Wow.
And the implication is that this group at the peak holds the Earth globe in its hands and moves it as they wish. Suggests a pretty profound level of control.
Wow, indeed. So why them? What, according to the source, gives them this ultimate power, this position at the very peak?
According to the sources, it's because they have supposedly captured territories of human consciousness over long periods.
Captured territories of consciousness.
Yeah, and have been directly involved in modifying the structure of human DNA over time. That's the claim.
Okay. And the others, the insectoids, draconians?
They seem to play a secondary role. Their focus is more on collecting and producing the necessary energy, primarily by, well, creating chaos in the lower realms.
Creating chaos to generate energy.
To fuel these top-tier entities' projects and essentially maintain their control over human consciousness. That's the picture painted.
All right, let's shift gears slightly and look ahead. The sources offer some intriguing glimpses into the future. Specifically, as of May 3, 2025, just days after this predicted blackout. And the outlook is surprisingly positive in some ways.
It is, yeah. One major consequence described is people becoming more conscious of balancing their daily lives towards self-sufficiency and self-sustainability.
How so? What does that look like?
Well, we get images of individuals creating their own electricity, planting things in gardens, and capturing solar energy through alternative systems, not just the usual panels we see now.
Interesting. And is this just like out in the country?
No, what's significant is this trend is apparently even growing in certain spaces in quite large cities, which would be a huge shift in lifestyle and mindset.
That sounds like a really powerful societal shift. And it's described as a mixture, right? Traditional wisdom meets new tech.
Exactly, like fire in the hearth and discussions between young and old, combined with technology that does not depend on the electricity we know.
So not reliant on the current grid. What kind of technology are we talking about here? This sounds like the really sci-fi part.
Well, what's particularly compelling is the concept of installations for capturing energy from the ether.
Energy from the ether. Okay, the idea of a universal energy field.
Pretty much. These systems would apparently convert particles of energy from the ether into electricity. It involves a type of engineering that works with natural elements and chemical formulas.
Any specifics?
Copper is highlighted as a key element because of its conductivity, malleability, and its ability to attract other molecules to create electricity. It's even mentioned as aiding plant growth and water purification.
Wow.
The source suggests its essence is about balance and restructuring.
So we're talking about a completely different way of generating power, maybe a kind of free energy. And humans themselves are part of this equation too, aren't they, as energy captors?
That's a crucial point, yeah, through intention and action.
How does that work? Does it relate to anything known?
Well, the sources refer to Tesla's incomplete or encrypted discoveries, specifically related to 369.
Ah, the 369 code. You hear about that sometimes.
Right. In esoteric circles, it's often linked to sacred geometry, free energy concepts. Here, it's described as a process involving the division and multiplication of particles that can produce energy.
And is this knowledge accessible?
What's interesting is the claim that information on energy generation is basically at a click's distance for those who have an intent to live a life in greater connection with their own power, consciousness, and the natural space.
So the intention unlocks the door, in a way.
It suggests that, yes, a conscious desire for self-sufficiency opens the door to accessing this knowledge.
That's a hopeful message, knowledge becoming more accessible for those actively seeking it. But back to the blackouts for a second. Will there be more? Or is this April 2025 thing supposed to be a one-off?
No, the sources confirm there will be more blackouts. It's perceived metaphorically like someone turning off the light.
And these aren't random.
They're described as organized events with varying time gaps between them. Deliberately designed, it seems, so people will forget between occurrences. The implication is definitely that these are controlled, not accidental.
Controlled events, okay? And those underground research bases we talked about earlier, where
Yeah.
the ultra-sensitive tech is, are they just in Spain or?
No, according to the source, these bases are under many physical territories globally, not just Spain,
And operated by?
by the top of the pyramid entities we discussed earlier.
Right, and the humans involved in these bases, what are they like?
They're described in a rather unsettling way as robotic-like.
Robotic-like.
Yeah, with an apparently atrophied emotional and sexual body, but a highly developed mental body that's filled with mathematical formulas.
Wow, that's chilling. Any idea why?
The implication seems to be their atrophy is a consequence of their specialized function to be purely logical, almost computational, unburdened by emotion, focused entirely on these complex formulas and the technology. They're essentially tools, it sounds like, for the entities at the top.
And their consciousness?
Their subliminal part, which the source uses to mean a non-physical aspect of consciousness, is described as being outside the head, like a cold, yellowish light.
Okay, that's deeply strange. What about the geniuses, then? People like Tesla, who supposedly developed this kind of advanced technology. Is it true their inventions aren't put into mass production? We hear conspiracy theories about that all the time.
It is true, according to these sources. Technology developed by geniuses, who are sometimes described as having an extraterrestrial consciousness themselves, exists, but is not put into mass production. There are a couple of reasons given.
Such as?
Partly because Other subliminal parts of collective consciousness, maybe the majority of humanity, resonate with different, perhaps less advanced methods. We're not ready, collectively.
Maybe. Or maybe it's just not convenient for those in power.
That's certainly implied too. But also, and this is maybe more profound, the source suggests information travels through an informational field.
An informational field.
Yeah, leading to simultaneous discoveries across the globe by different people, not just one lone inventor having a breakthrough.
So the idea is just out there waiting to be picked up.
Kind of. So the knowledge might be available, but the collective may not be ready, or it's simply not adopted for mass use by the controlling forces. It's complex.
It really is. Multiple people discovering the same thing because the info is just in the field.
Wow.
Okay, moving on slightly. What about ETs who might, wish humans well? Are there beings like that mentioned? How do they interact, if at all?
The sources do acknowledge the concept of extraterrestrials who wish humans well, but they're described primarily as observers.
Just observers. They don't help.
Crucially, no. They apparently do not emit judgments, emotions, or any kind of frequency. Their neutrality, this non-invasive quality, is presented as key.
Why is that key?
To allow organic human growth without interference. The idea seems to be that any form of help, even driven by compassion, would actually interfere with our natural development, our own path, so they simply witness.
So true support, from this viewpoint, is non-interference, letting us figure it out ourselves. That actually makes a weird kind of sense for fostering independence.
It does, doesn't it?
Okay, so finally, practical advice. What recommendations do the sources offer for navigating future blackouts or really any powerful, potentially chaotic events like this?
It boils down to one main thing. Focus on presence and natural grounding.
Presence and grounding, what does that feel like?
The feeling described is like an abdominal pulsation that connects you to the earth. It provides a state of strength.
Okay.
The goal is to act, not react. To use any wave of panic coming from others, not as something to get swept up in, but as a reminder.
A reminder to do what?
To activate your own force and protection from within. To become essentially unshakable.
And how do you do that?
Breathing is emphasized as key. Staying centered, connecting to that inner strength through breath, it makes you less susceptible to the external chaos.
Act, don't react. Ground yourself. Breathe. Sounds simple, but probably very powerful in the moment.
That's the idea.
Okay, let's definitely take a step back now. We need to apply some critical thinking to all of this extraordinary stuff. We've just absorbed a lot of fascinating, frankly wild information about a predicted future event, complex energy dynamics, ETs.
Yeah, it's a lot.
But the source itself, this hypnosis investigative session, comes with its own critical disclaimers about reliability, right? What exactly does the source material say about its own nature?
Well, this is maybe the most important part for context. The source itself, or rather the analysis of sources like this, explicitly states that investigative hypnosis sessions used as a sole source for factual data, well, they do not really exist in a reliable sense.
Don't really exist. That's strong.
Yeah. The expert voice in the source material emphasizes that the percentage of contamination of this information is absolutely high.
High contamination. Okay. What exactly makes it so susceptible to distortion, according to this analysis?
Well, there are multiple reasons given. Information obtained this way, it travels through many dimensions, densities. It passes through consciousnesses that voluntarily or involuntarily can distort it.
Okay. Layers of potential filters.
Exactly. And ultimately, it's interpreted by the person in hypnosis according to their mental structure, beliefs, education, and culture. Their own personal lens shapes everything.
Right.
The analogy used is really powerful. It's like talking underwater with different languages. The message gets severely distorted. So what comes through is rarely, if ever, a pure, untainted fact.
Talking underwater in different languages. Yeah, that paints a picture. So the value isn't in the literal facts or figures that might come out of a single session, then? Is that what they're saying?
Precisely. The value of information in a single hypnosis session isn't about memorizing data or getting predictions. Instead, it serves as a vehicle of movement, of transport towards the cause of the problem for the client.
So it's therapeutic.
For the individual. Exactly. It's a tool for personal healing or insight, not for global fact-finding. It's about revealing maybe a hidden aspect influencing an individual's life, not providing verifiable world news or future events.
That makes a lot more sense in that context. Okay, so if single sessions are so contaminated, how is truly reliable investigative work in this esoteric realm actually done, according to this source analysis anyway?
Reliable information, as per this source, is acquired only through meticulous comparison. We're talking thousands of sessions.
Thousands.
Yes, conducted by many different people with many other people under hypnosis over time. The only information considered good or potentially reliable is that which is common to all or almost all of these thousands of sessions.
So you're looking for the tiny overlap, the consistent thread.
Exactly. And that common thread often represents a very low percentage. The source quotes maybe just 2–3% of all the information obtained across all those sessions.
Wow, only 2–3% is considered potentially solid.
Everything else, they explicitly state, is deemed garbage. Informationally speaking, of course. It's about finding those rare, consistent patterns, not taking isolated revelations as fact.
Garbage. That really puts it in perspective. What about the challenge of getting authorized information? I mentioned dealing with other subliminal parts or entities.
Yeah, that's another significant hurdle mentioned. There's a real risk of encountering cunning entities who might provide manipulated or false data, especially when trying to get info about things not directly related to the person under hypnosis.
How do you tell the difference?
Well, the source compares it to choosing an official news source versus some random blog. You want a trusted, verified source, not just any passing thought or some entity's potentially biased perspective or deliberate disinformation. It requires immense discernment.
That makes sense. So would focusing an investigation be more reliable, like narrowing the topic?
Oh, yes, exactly. The source explains that investigations on very restricted spaces, the example given was hypothetically pedophilia in the Catholic Church, are more feasible than trying to investigate vast historical periods or predict future global events.
Why is that?
Because narrowing the scope significantly increases the likelihood of finding that reliable, common information that surfaces consistently across multiple sessions with different people. It reduces that garbage factor and makes cross-verification possible.
Okay. So wrapping this all up, we've taken a really deep dive into a truly fascinating and, let's be honest, pretty out-there prediction of a future event. We explored its potential physical and metaphysical causes, ripple effects, future tech.
And even the supposed hierarchy of control behind it all.
Right. But, crucially, we've also spent time understanding the complex and apparently highly contaminated nature of the very type of source from which this specific information emerged. That hypnosis session.
Yeah, and that critical lens is so important. It highlights the vital importance of thinking critically, doesn't it? Not just evaluating the content of a message, but also really considering the origin, the method of its delivery.
Absolutely. This whole deep dive, exploring the blackout prediction through the lens of a hypnosis session, serves as a powerful case study, really, for assessing any extraordinary claim we encounter. So, considering everything we've discussed today, the interconnectedness of events, these ideas of hidden influences, and the inherent contamination factor in certain kinds of information, how might you, the listener, approach and critically evaluate the various sources you encounter in your own daily life? How can you maybe cultivate your own inner grounding, like the source suggested, and that critical thinking muscle to extract truly valuable insights from the vast sea of data all around us, whatever its origin? Something to ponder, perhaps.
Definitely keep asking those questions, keep exploring, and keep seeking your own aha moments. Don't just accept things at face value.
Join us next time on The Deep Dive.